Gita is not just a book that you read. In India, people hold it this way. If you even as much as get to hold it in your hand, that itself will liberate you. Because of this, many varieties of practices came out of it and people kept it under their pillows and slept. People ate pages of Gita. Don't do such things. But I want you to receive this and hold this and feel this like it's a sacred thing. It's essential because if you do not have the heart of a devotee, you cannot perceive Gita right. So, I want you to get into that state and then read. Don't try to read it like a book, just open here, there and read what you want. Now, the Gita, this is a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. There is a whole story as Krishna was born and he's growing up in Mathura and born in Mathura, childhood in Gokula and adolescence in Vrindavan. As this is happening, in another part of the country, which is a major empire in those days, in Hastinapur, something else is happening. There's a whole family there which grows up and which is connected to Krishna because Krishna's aunt, that is his father's sister, bore 3 children who became valiant warriors, who were part of the 5 brothers called Pandavas. Arjuna is one of them. So much later, after so much happens in between, this is the final phase when Krishna and Arjuna are having a conversation. To perceive the nature of conversation, one must understand the relationship that they hold between them. They have been through many things together. They have shared wonderful times. They have shared very happy times between them. Krishna has reached out to them, to Arjuna, when he was in the most unfortunate states. Arjuna went through a whole upheaval in his life, the kind of upheaval that most people cannot even imagine. He went through so much disgrace, so much victory, so much celebration, and so much of pain and suffering. He went through a whole drama of life. At every point, Krishna was there in his life in many, many ways. So Arjuna knows Krishna as an intimate friend, as a brother, as a cousin brother. And he sees him as his guru, he's his disciple. And above all, he worships him as God. So it's a complex relationship of very intimate friendship, great devotion and a friend. And somebody who's grown up together, sharing many things, from fun to pain, everything they have shared between them. They have fought many battles together. They have gone through situations of extreme strife together and great moments of celebration together. So this is a complex relationship. So the way they speak to each other, if you want to grasp the essence of why Krishna is speaking the way he is speaking, there are some times you have to be with him as a close friend, there are some times you have to bow down to him as God himself, there are some times you have to sit there as a disciple with a incisive mind. So there are different phases that they are going through between them, and accordingly he speaks. So to understand the essence of the Gita, to understand and perceive the nature of conversation that's happening, you must be willing to hold these kind of relationships with Krishna as he changes his role. Accordingly, you must change your relationship with him, otherwise you will not understand why he's speaking the way he's speaking. Make an attempt towards that.
Krishna is the brightest star of that period. But you will understand the significance of his brightness only if you understand in what milieu the whole thing happened. So Mahabharata is one long story with innumerable stories encased. If we have to go into all of them, it'll take a few years of storytelling. So I will just touch on a few main aspects which lead to Krishna growing in stature and becoming a kind of kingmaker and a statesman of those times. There was a great sage whose name was Parashara. He was known as the Parashara Maharishi. He is the grandson of Vasishtha. Vasishtha is the one who wrote Ramayana. Parashara was a man of immense knowledge, a realized being who strived to establish dharma in the society. So he went about establishing hundreds of ashrams around the country with very dedicated people steeped in sadhana. But at those times, because there were also hundreds of kings and kingdoms, minor ones, major ones, some of them who claimed to be emperors. Many of them were utter tyrants, and there were also other barbarian hordes who are generally referred to as Rakshasas, who were of tribal origin, and some of them even cannibalistic. So there was a lot of violence against the ashrams because they were unprotected places. Meditating people, not good fighters, you know. Not us, we will fight. Don't look at Vibhu and others, he won't fight. I will fight. So, frequent attacks against these ashrams were happening. So there were two types of dharmas. Actually, there were four types, two were most prominent. So this was known as the varnashrama dharma. There are two levels of this. One is in terms of stages of life, Another is in terms of division of responsibility in labor in the society. So they were established as four varnas or four, which later on evolved into the horrible caste system of today. They were known as the Shudras, the Vaishyas, the Kshatriyas and the Brahmanas. Shudras were those people who were illiterate, did not focus on learning, did only menial jobs, or fundamentally they did not even take responsibility for anything around them. They just lived eating, sleeping, reproducing. Vaishyas were people who were traders, who handled commerce, who are taking responsibility for the community in a certain way, in their own community. Vaishyas always have very deep sense of attachment and responsibility to the family. You will always see even today, it's like that. There's a very deep sense of identification and attachment with the family in the Vaishya community, always. So they handled commerce. The Kshatriyas handled administration. They were the kings. They had to govern. The governance was in their hands. And the Brahmanas held education, religion and spiritual process. So the Brahmins were considered the most superior because they dealt with the beyond. Kshatriyas were powerful because they were the military might and the military muscle of the society. Vaishyas manipulated their way around because they had the money. Shudras, generally trampled upon, but they had the strength of numbers. They were huge numbers. Once in a way they flared up into violence and put everybody down, but generally they were downtrodden. This was the social condition. So for all these four levels of society, they established four different types of dharmas. Dharma means like a law, like a righteousness. How a Shudra should live, how a Vaishya should live, how a Kshatriya should live, how a Brahmana should live. According to his responsibility and according to the nature of his activity, how he should function, they established a certain dharma or a law that people should follow. A law not in terms of law that can be enforced by somebody, it's more a social code and a kind of thing that is transmitted from generation to generation, that a Kshatriya means this is how he eats, this is how he marries, this is how he does things, everything is fixed up for him. A Brahmana means this is the way he does all his things. Similarly, for every segment, they had established a dharma. So here, what is relevant for us is the dharma of the Kshatriyas, because they are governance and military, and the dharma of the Brahmins because they are the access and the means for the spiritual process. So the dharma of the Brahmins was known as the Brahmatej. The dharma of the Kshatriyas were known as Kshatratej. So there was discord between Brahmatej and Kshatratej. Unless these two respect each other's dharma, the society cannot flow smoothly. So a situation had come when the kings were drunk with power and they no more respect the Brahmatej. And in many ways, the Brahmins also have fallen on corruption and bad times, and they've lost the reverence and respect that they did command at one time. So there was a whole discord in the society. So Parashara took it as a moment. He travelled across the country establishing hundreds of ashrams to establish Brahmatej. He was trying to make contact with the kings of the time so that he could also bring some kind of coordination between Brahmatej and the Kshatratej. The dharma of the Brahmins and the dharma of the Kshatriyas, the dharma of the priestly class and the dharma of the ruling class. Because he took up this movement, he was hugely respected and looked up to. At the same time, naturally he made enemies. It's bound to happen. When you start any kind of movement, you will gather some amount of people behind you, you will gather some amount of people against you. It's invariably, it's invariably always happens, any time in history. Once you take up a movement, there'll be some behind you, some against you. You just have to handle it tactfully that there are more behind you than against you, that's all. So Parashara's ashram was attacked and he was injured to a point where his leg was very badly hurt. So he escaped somehow and somebody who cared for him put him in a boat and took him across to a small island where some fisher folk lived, so that his attackers don't pursue him and put him to death. So he was being nursed by the fisher folk. A girl, a young girl, the daughter of the chief of that fishing tribe, whose name was Matsyagandhi, that means the one who smells like a fish. See, in the fisherman community, the one who smells like a fish is sought after, Yes. So Matsyagandhi, who was just 16 years of age, started tending to Parashara, and Parashara, being a towering personality of immense knowledge and wisdom, invariably she was deeply drawn towards him, and he stayed there for over a year because he had a bad injury. After that he never walked straight, that bad an injury he had, whatever has happened to him. So a certain relationship developed between them and a child was born to her, who was known as Krishna Dvaipayana. The word Krishna literally means… the literal meaning of the word Krishna means the puller or the one who attracts. So Krishna was a common name even then. There are many characters in Mahabharata who have the same name, but they have an additional name to distinguish them from the Krishna or Radha Krishna. So, he's Krishna Dvaipayana. Krishna Dvaipayana was born, but by then Parashara recovered and he left. The child, since the time he could speak and understand, he asked the mother, "Who is my father?" The mother told fantastic stories about the father, what a great man his father was. In her simple ways, she tried to convey to the child. From the moment she started nursing the child with her milk, she wanted the child to be influenced by the father's wisdom and knowledge, and not just by the fisherman community that lived there. So, along with her milk from her breast, she fed him the stories of her father, how great and wonderful a man her father was, his father was. The child grew up with a tremendous awe towards a father that he had never seen. So all the time, The child asked the mother, why is father not with us? So the mother again and again told the child what great things his father is doing, that he cannot stay in one place. He has to travel and he is sought after everywhere in the country. They don't refer to the country as country, the subcontinent is referred to as the world. Because in those times, there were only two places which this culture considered as world was the subcontinent and Greece. So the Indian subcontinent and Greece were the only two places where there was an evolved culture. So these were the only two places that in Indian literature considered it as world. Rest of it was considered like wilderness. So the father has to go around the world, spread his knowledge and wisdom, so he cannot be with us. So Krishna Dvaipayana again and again asked, if he cannot be with us, why can't we go with him? So the mother again said, he cannot take us with him because he's into various situations, traveling. So the child grew up with a tremendous sense of awe about the father and he wants to go with the father. His only goal is he wants to go with his father. He went about telling the children in the fisherman village, oh, my father knows the stars, knows the sun, knows the moon. There is nothing that he does not know. He was not too far off the mark because Parashara was that kind of man. If the boy had these gadgets, trapped on that little island, wanting to go with his father. Then when Dvaipayana was 6 years of age, Parashara once again visited. And this was boy's dream come true, and the 6-year-old boy wouldn't sleep a wink. He wants to sit with his father and know everything that father knows, because father knows the sun, the moon and the stars and everything. He wants to know every bit of it. He asked questions and questions and questions. Parashara was amazed at the boy's capability. Like a sponge, he soaked everything that his father spoke. His ability to learn and perceive was so tremendous, anything that was uttered once never had to be repeated for him at any time in his life. If anything was told to him once and that's it. The father noticed this incredible quality in the child, that he is a great learner. And when time to leave came, Dvaipayana said, I want to go with you. Parashara said, you're only 6. You're an incredible boy, but you're only 6. You cannot travel with me. So Dvaipayana asked, okay, what is it that I can do after 2 years that I cannot do right now? Tell me, what is it? When Parashara looked at the boy, he couldn't answer that question, because when he looked at the boy is capable of doing what a man of 30 cannot do intellectually. Then Parashara said, see, you cannot travel with me as my son. I cannot take my son and go around the world. Only my disciples can go with me. My son cannot go with me. Then Dvaipayana said, let me become your disciple. Once again Parashara said, you're still a child. You're only 6. Spend some more time with your mother. Dvaipayana said nothing to him. I want to go. You initiate me right now as your disciple, I will go. So Parashara had no choice. He initiated the 6-year-old boy into brahmacharya, made him his disciple, and with a shaven head, this little boy with a begging bowl followed his father or his guru. And he displayed his incredible intellectual capability, that anything that was ever said once never had to be repeated to him again. Slowly his learning became such. Parashara noticed, if he says one thing, 10 things that are connected with that one thing that has been uttered, Dvaipayana already knows. His ability to grasp things from his father became so tremendous because he was so one-pointed towards his father, who was Parashara, now his guru. He was so one-pointed, if Parashara says one thing, the next 10 things need not be said, he just grasped it. Dvaipayana at a very early age grew into a man of towering intelligence and knowledge. By the time he was 16, there was no equal for him anywhere. He was that learned. Then there was another great sage who was known as Mahabharata. Those of you who know, there are 4 sacred books which are known as the Vedas. The last of the Veda is Atharvana Veda. Atharvana Veda is the science of manipulating energies to make things happen for you in the world. Occult sciences. The Vedic traditions had rejected this and were not willing to include Atharvana Veda as a part of the sacred 4. There were only 3 Vedas. Atharvana Veda rejected by the larger Brahmin community. So Mahatharvan worked with Parashara and later on with Krishna Dvaipayana to include Atharvana Veda on the same level, with the same significance as the other 3 Vedas. So now there are 4 Vedas because of his work. Parashara became old and sort of withdrew from active life of traveling and establishing this dharma. But Krishna Dvaipayana, who was later on called as the Vyasa Muni, took up the mission at the age of 16. He is incomparable, and he took up this mission of spreading the dharma in the world. This Krishna Dvaipayana's mother, Matsyagandhi, the one who smells like a fish, left the island and wandered into another part of the country. And she lived on the banks of Ganga. And one day, Emperor Shantanu was walking by the river because of her association with Parashara. When Parashara came and met this girl and she nursed him, and then this child was born between them, Parashara gave her the boon of having a very sweet fragrance. So she lost the fish smell and she had a very sweet fragrance. Maybe that's why she could not live with the fisher community anymore. So she wandered off with a very sweet fragrant smell about her. So she got renamed as Satyavati, and she was on the riverbank, and the emperor came this way and he smelt this sweet fragrance. He was so drawn to the smell, he went in search of it, and then he found this woman who was sitting on the riverbank was emanating this wonderful fragrance. So he got totally mesmerized by this fragrance, fell in love with her, then made Satyavati the empress. So this fisherwoman married the emperor and became his wife. In the meantime, Krishna Dvaipayana married Vatika, who was the daughter of Mahatharvan. So that was a great alliance in knowledge. This was a great alliance in Kshatrotej or in the governance, because the emperor of Hastinapur married this fisherwoman whose son is a great sage, and he also married Mahatharvan, who is in charge of another lineage of occult sciences. So the occult sciences and the regular spiritual process and the governance somewhere found links, and through that partnership they started working towards creating a society where there would be a proper harmony between these three dimensions in a society. Santanu and Satyavati had two children. Krishna Dvaipayana had one son who is the Sukha. People from Indian origin have heard about Sukha. Sukha was a very wonderful sage. He was born that way. Nobody had to initiate him into anything. He was born realized. There are beautiful stories about him. Sukha was an avaduta. An avaduta means one who is infant-like. He has absolutely no identifications. He's like an infant. He's a grown-up man, but he's like an infant. So most of the time he just walked naked. Not because he's taken a vow that he won't wear clothes or something like this. It just didn't occur to him. Because he's not identified with the body, it just didn't occur to him that he has to cover it this way or that way. He simply walked like a child. There's a very beautiful story. One day Sukha was just walking through the forest and… you mind if I enjoy my drink? Sukha was just walking through the forest and he happened to walk towards a pond. In the pond, a few princesses from the local palace or the local kingdom had come there for a picnic, and because they were all girls, they took off their clothes and they were just swimming and playing in the pond. Sukha just walked that way and they continued to play. They saw Sukha, but nobody was disturbed by this man's presence because he was not a man. He was not at all identified with his body, he was walking like a child. So the women were not disturbed, they continued with their dalliance, naked. Then Vyasa, by then he was 72 years of age, fully clothed. He came in search of Sukha. The moment Vyasa appeared in the open, all the girls ran for their clothes. Then Vyasa thought, what is this? A young man in his prime, walking naked. He comes here, you people don't run for your clothes. I am a 72-year-old man, fully clothed, and I come here, you run for your clothes. What is this? Then the woman said, Sukha is not a man, but you are a man. So Dvaipayana produced a wonderful child like Sukha, who was born realized. Shantanu and Satyavati produced two sons, Chitrangad and Vichitravirya. Chitrangad died very young in a battle. Vichitravirya, they wanted to get him married, and before this, their first son No. This Vichitravirya and Chitrangada were born. Apart from this, Santanu was walking on the bank of Ganga again, and Ganga herself was there. This was even before, I'm sorry. Before he met Satyavati, he met Ganga and he married Ganga. But Ganga put a condition, if you want to marry me, there is a condition. Whatever I do, you should not ask any questions. It's a general condition that most of you put in these days. So you should never ask a question about what I do, however strange my actions, you should never ask a question. Because Shantanu was so madly in love with her, he said yes. Then with that marriage, she bore one son. She took the son and drowned him in the river, the just born child, her own child. Shantanu was aghast, but he cannot ask because she has already put the condition. If he asks a question about the nature of her action, she will leave. So he contained himself. One more child was born. Again she went and drowned the child in the river. Santanu was very distressed, but you cannot ask. If you ask, she will leave. Like this, 7 children followed. When the 8th was born, he looked at this healthy boy who was born and he said, enough, 7 children, you have drowned them in the river. This one, spare this one, what is this? Then Ganga said, you have broken your condition, I am leaving. I told you, you should never ask. Now that you have asked, I need to go. But now that you have a deep sense of attachment and love for your child, this one child I will spare, but you have lost me. For the first few years, let me raise the boy, then I will hand him over to you. But this is the end of me and you. So the boy was raised, and one day when Shantanu again, he kept wandering on the banks of Ganga hoping to see her again. And one day he found that the river Ganga itself was diverted slightly from its normal course. The water had risen in one place and sunken in the other place. It looked like a strange phenomenon for him. He just went close to see what's happening. Then he found somebody had built a wonderful dam-like structure with arrows. He just saw what kind of a archer he must be to build a structure like this with arrows. He was amazed. Then he saw a 12-year-old boy standing there with bow and arrow and continuing to develop on what he had already done. He went to that boy and asked, who are you? That you have such skill. You must be a Kshatriya. In those days, if you are good with your arms, if you know how to use swords and arms and other weapons, you must be a Kshatriya. That's the understanding. You must be a Kshatriya. Who are you? So the boy said, my name is Gangeya. Then the mother came, the Ganga. She said, this is your son. He's old enough for you to take him. He's already well versed in the Vedas and Upanishads and use of arms and everything. He is hugely endowed. You can take him and he will become a good heir apparent for you. After you, he will be a wonderful king. So Shantanu took the boy, but Ganga disappeared. So Gangeya was growing up, and now Shantanu is in love with Satyavati. And when he wanted her in marriage, already we produced 2 children, this is before that. When he wanted to marry Satyavati, and he went to Satyavati's father to ask her hand, Satyavati's father put a condition. So if you want to marry my daughter, condition, poor guy. He said, you must promise that her children will become the future kings. You already have a grown-up son, so naturally you have already appointed him as the heir apparent. So my grandchildren or my daughter's sons will not get that opportunity, so there is no point. So only if you promise that my daughter, the children or the sons that my daughter bears will become the future kings of your empire, I will permit you to marry my daughter, otherwise no. Santanu was hugely distressed, but he was madly in love with this woman, totally infatuated that he couldn't live without her. He went back to the palace because he had no heart to tell his older son that to relinquish his right to be the king. He went, but he could not eat properly, he could not sleep properly. He stood in corners and acted funny. You know, when people want to have their way, what they do. I see them every day. So his son, though a youth, he is of much wisdom and learning. So he noticed his father acting funny, and out of his respect and love, he went and asked, "Oh father, what's bothering you? You're not yourself. You're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, you're not interested in anything. What is the matter?" Already most of the administration and the military aspects of being a king were already being handled by Gangeya. Santanu was mostly like a retired king, just having fun and getting married again and again. Then he had no heart to tell his son what's happened. But Gangeya found out what is the cause of distress for his father. So he went straight to Matsyagandhi's father or Satyavati's father and told him, "See here, I promise you that I will not become the king. The children that your daughter bears, I will see that they will become the kings of this land, not me. I relinquish my right to become the king." So the mean as the man was, he said, "That is okay, you are saying this, really gracious of you, but as per the laws of the Aryavarta, that is the tradition, your children tomorrow when they are born, naturally they will become the kings. For one generation, if my grandchildren rule, after that anyway your children will take over again. So that is still not agreeable," he said. So immediately Gangeya took a vow, "I will never marry, nor will I reproduce, so that your children, their children and their children will rule." Everybody was aghast at the vow that he took. And he promised the man, and the man sent the daughter. So he brought Satyavati along and got his father married. He relinquished his kingdom, and he also took a vow that he will never marry in his life or have a child, because Satyavati's progeny should rule. This distressed the whole citizenry. How can this be? This man is so mean that he just used this boy as a pawn to get what he wants. But Gangeya would not relent from the vow that he took. Because of such a strong vow that he took, people called him Bhishma. Bhishma means terrible. He took a terrible vow against his own well-being. So they called him Bhishma, and he was known as Bhishma throughout his life. He grew into a scintillating personality in Mahabharata. He is like the fulcrum, he is always there in every situation. He is like the balance between the extremes that were happening. So these two guys, Chitrangada and Vichitravirya, were born. Chitrangada died very early in a battle. Vichitravirya, so they were in a hurry to get him married, and because having children is very important because there is a kingdom to inherit. So they wanted to find appropriate brides for Vichitravirya, but Vichitravirya was not of any great caliber or strength. So Bhishma was the main power, but Vichitravirya was the heir apparent. So in those days, for the princesses to be married, there used to be a procedure called Swayamvara, where all the kings and princesses will arrive, people of a certain stature. The girl is given a garland and she has a choice. She can just choose and put a garland over any man that she chooses, and she becomes his wife. So women had, at least in a certain level of society, they had this freedom to choose their own husbands. That they just walked around among the 100 kings that were there, she would choose whom she wants and put the garland on him. There would be some homework, she would know who is who. So there was a Swayamvara for the daughters of king of Kashi. His 3 daughters, Amba, Ambika and Ambalika. For these 3 daughters, there was a Swayamvara, a place where they can choose their grooms. Amba was already in love with the Chedi king called Shalya. So she was decided, anyway he will come for the Swayamvara and she will put the garland on him and that's it. The other 2 were yet to choose, so that was the situation. There was also another way of acquiring a bride. A king can go forcefully and abduct the woman and make her his wife. This is something that Krishna tried to break later on. He said, this is adharma, this is not justice. That you can't just rob a woman like a cattle or something and make it yours, make her yours. Later on, he tried to work towards it. But this was also in vogue, that a king, it was considered very macho and very… It's like chivalry, that the man goes and, fights with the people there and grabs the woman and takes her. So he was considered a hero who can take his woman and go away. You always had dreams, on the white horse, the knight will come and it all comes from that. That means you. So Bhishma, who was a great warrior and a hero without parallel, just went there, grabbed all the 3 girls. People who chased him, he defeated all of them, nobody dared to fight with him. He put all of them down, grabbed all the 3 girls and brought them. Ambika and Ambalika were okay with this because Bhishma did not grab the girls for himself. He grabbed the girls for Vichitravirya because he can't do it by himself. So the other two girls were okay, anyway they were marrying a emperor, future emperor at least. So they were okay. But Amba was furious because she was in love with somebody else. So when she was brought down here, she said, how could you do this? Because Bhishma or Gangeya was known to be an embodiment of righteousness. He stood by the law, he stood by those times, the ethics and morals of those times. No matter what, even at the cost of his life, he stood by those codes and mores that were there. So she said, you are known to be the very embodiment of dharma. What have you done? You brought an unwilling woman. My heart is somewhere else. You brought me here by force. Then Bhishma said, if that is so, you may go. So he gave her an escort and sent her back. She came back and she wanted to get married to Shalva, the king of Chedi. But Shalva rejected her. Shalva said, now I am not going to take charity from somebody else. I could not fight and get my wife. He took you away, I lost the fight. Now I am not going to receive charity from him and marry you, you go back to him. Now this girl was neither here nor there. So she went back to Bhishma and she said, you spoiled everything for me. So you marry me now. Because there was no question of a woman living without marriage in those days. It was an essential part of living in the society. There was no question of woman beyond a certain age existing without a marriage. So, the man that I love is not willing to marry because he doesn't want to receive me as charity. Now, these other two girls, my sisters, have already married the emperor, so I am not there, I am not interested in marrying. Now you are the man who won me, so you marry me. Bhishma said, I have taken a vow, I cannot marry anybody. She said, I don't care about your vow, you have ruined my life, so you have to marry me. Bhishma said, no. Then Amba took a vow. Now I am a woman, I am helpless, I am not able to do anything about you. You are a great hero. I will be born once again as a man and I will put an end to you. When Bhishma took this vow and gave up his kingdom and his… he took this vow of not marrying anybody or reproducing, and to allow his father to marry this Satyavati, his father felt so totally moved by his son's sacrifice. He gave him a boon, he said, you will not die by anybody's hand. You will die only when you wish. You can die by choice, or if you don't wish to die, you can live forever. He gave him this boon. But Amba took a vow that I will put an end to you. You have just ruined my life because I am a helpless woman. You stole me, you took me away from the man that I love, and you're refusing to marry me now, and I'm nowhere. So, she disappeared or she died. It happened, she used to be born somewhere else as a man to put an end to Bhishma. This was one element which continuously bothered Bhishma all through his life, that he ruined this girl's life in some way. He's a very, very righteous, moral man. So this Vichitravirya also died of some strange disease that they could not figure out. But he had two wives who have not produced any children. There is no progeny for the king. Bhishma is there, but he refuses to marry because he's taken a vow. Satyavati said, after all you took this vow to allow me to marry your father, all that is over. Now there is no progeny for the kingdom. You marry, it's okay. Let there be a progeny, this was known as the Bharata race. It is out of that India is called Bharat. This whole dynasty were called as Bharatas, that's why it's Mahabharata. So the Bharatas will go without a progeny, we cannot let such a thing happen. So you must get married. These two girls are still young and they don't have children. You marry these two girls. Bhishma said no. So it was also allowed in the Arya tradition, and it was an established practice to some extent, that many queens and princesses were taken in a ritual to be impregnated by great sages. Because producing a child was not a ego thing. They wanted the best man. They wanted the best man to plant the seed into the woman. So this tradition was there. So according to the tradition, they decided that the greatest sage in the world at that time was Krishna Dvaipayana. They thought if he can somehow do this for the Bharata race, then the Bharata race will flourish. So according to this, it is a ritualistic process, in a certain way it is done, but this is a ascetic. He is all dreadlocks and vibhuti man. So these princesses were sent to Krishna Dvaipayana, who is a dreadlocked wild ascetic. So when Ambika went and saw him, he looked so fierce, she just closed her eyes and never opened it again. It was just a job to be done with. So she went through it and she became pregnant and delivered Dhritarashtra, who was born blind because she closed her eyes with such resistance. When Ambalika went to him, she was even more terrified. She trembled and shivered. Because of that, when she delivered Pandu, Pandu has nervous ailments where he constantly trembled. He was a sick man right from his birth. So they landed up with progeny, one blind, another. So between Pandu and Dhritarashtra, Dhritarashtra got married many times and he had 100 sons. Pandu had two wives, Kunti and Madri. Kunti is Krishna's aunt. Kunti is Vasudeva's sister. So Kunti had three children, who are the first three brothers who are referred to as Pandavas, and the other two children, Nakula and Sahadeva, came from Madri. So these five brothers are Pandu's sons and 100 sons of Dhritarashtra. The whole drama started between these two groups of people, both of them fighting for the empire, which covered most of today's India, a large part of today's India. These five brothers excelled in everything that they were doing, in the use of arms, in scholarship, in their moral behavior. But the 100 sons, somehow, with a blind father, they were little unruly and did not have the same level of focus and purpose to their lives. Because Yudhishthira, the oldest of these five brothers, was the oldest among the progeny, and because Dhritarashtra was blind, born blind, he did not become the king. Pandu became the king, and Pandu's first son Yudhishthira naturally became the heir apparent. But Dhritarashtra was the older of the brothers. He should have rightfully been the king, but because he was blind, born blind, the younger brother became the king and his children became heir apparent. So among these 100 brothers, the oldest of them, the Duryodhana, was all the time feeling cheated, deceived out of what was his. So this discontent started a whole violent drama between the two families. And Krishna played a role of trying to bring some peace in so many ways. When it did not work, ultimately it went to one of the greatest wars in this part of the world, where they say over 500,000 soldiers participated and almost all of them died. This is 3,500 years ago. 500,000 soldiers participated and almost all of them died in the battle. I think you should sleep. We will fit in Krishna into this story tomorrow, where he comes in and goes out in so many different ways. Please.